The Geekouts is a name that comes from my time with Bobby Paul's a Nintendo guru. A lot of what we do now is really thanks to him. So there's a lot of homage to him kind of all over the place. The Bobby, the little like icon that you see, the mascot for Carpool Gaming, is named Bobby, B-A-W-B-Y, and Geekouts is something Bobby would do in all of his shows except for the ones he did with me. He would start off his shows with the Geekouts, and it'd be, instead of just diving into what he's playing, just like stuff that's getting him or the guests or the co-hosts excited. And whenever I did a show with him, it was always, we started each and every week with shout outs, and we would recognize members of the community, and I would always shout Geekouts. I would always want to do a Geek Out. So this is a little bit of that. And I want to have almost like maybe in the audio intro, a moment where we did that, because he would roll into his usual spiel. We start each and every week with our Geekouts, and I would go, shout outs, yes, shout outs. Oh, I'm so excited for my Geekouts. Oh my gosh, yes, time for the Geekouts. So that's what this is all about, Ryan Turford. And we begin with a little kind of book club-esque kind of thing. We're going full spoilers on Scott Pilgrim, my friend.
Yes, absolutely. This is something we've been talking about, hinting at, we're talking about on, many, many podcasts for a long time. Scott Pilgrim's finally here. This was originally, the original idea was actually just to do like a comic book podcast with just Scott Pilgrim. And this was going to kind of kick it off and then do kind of all kinds of different comics after that. But that was when Sean was really into comics. I don't know why I call
Who says it's not going to be that anymore? Don't crush my dreams.
I'm just saying that it's going to be Geekouts. Let me finish. So the Geekouts itself is going to end up being more than just comics.
That's true. Top Gun, who knows, man? We could do movies. We could do whatever we want. So yes, you're right. It can be more than just...
I've got a Friday the 13th box set sitting on my shelf waiting for Donnie Reese to come on the show.
Oh,
so we can just dissect all the Friday the 13th movies. So just saying.
And I think that there could be, and we'll kind of like figure this out as we go along, I think is probably the crux of it. But yeah, I think there will be like little packaged things. We can't do at least for me, I didn't want to do the entire Scott Pilgrim series like all at once in a 90-minute thing. Like there's just too much. There's too much to do. Well, and it's funny because I talked about the same thing with the RPG Cave. Like I want you guys to do like series of stuff. If you're going to like do a whole background on Final Fantasy, like give me 6 episodes on that kind of thing. But anyways, dude, these books, I like, this will go down as my gateway drug into comic books.
Nice. I mean, so
nice.
So, I mean, well, I wasn't expecting to stop there. So, yeah, I mean, it's important for us as we begin the show, Sean.
Yes.
We should talk about kind of our experience with Scott Pilgrim. So, obviously, this is your gateway to comics. So, obviously, you're a new Scott Pilgrim person. You haven't watched the movie, right? You haven't.
I've not. I'm going to wait till I'm done this.
You've only read the 1 or 2 volumes that we're going to talk about today, essentially.
Yeah, I think I read the 3rd book as well, but I've just recently reread the first 2. Yes.
Okay. So, again, the first 2 we're going to talk about today. As for me, Sean, my history with Scott Pilgrim goes back quite a ways. I ended up actually seeing the movie in theaters in 2010.
Yeah.
That was kind of my first exposure to Scott Pilgrim because my brother Kyle was like raving about Scott Pilgrim for a long time because he was actually reading the comics as they were coming out. And I remember going to the theater and seeing it, and I was like, this looks kind of cool, but I don't know if I'm going to really like this. But then I was like blown away with how amazing the movie was.
Yeah.
Because the movie was done by Edgar Wright, who did, Shaun of the Dead and Hot Fuzz and a bunch of great, movies as well. And I love kind of his editing style and the way he puts his movies together. So I was so blown away by the movie. I was like, okay, I got to go out and, pick up the books and read them. So I've actually got here my box set, the Scott Pilgrim box set. This is the one that came out in 2010 along with the movie because while the movie was being made, the final book was still being written and it actually came out after the movie. So this box set came out when the 6th book eventually came out, essentially. So that came out, not too long after the movie did, which is around when the game came out as well. Which I should also mention, Sean, I know you've played the game. And you're also a big fan of Scott Pilgrim, the game as well.
I don't think I've beaten it though. I think I got stuck. I think it's a hard game. I think it's a hard ass game, man. I want to get back to it though. Now that I was just thinking on my way home, I'm like, I think I'm just kind of, I think I'm a Scottaholic, Ryan. As Knives would say, I think I'm kind of all in. And what I'm excited to do today is like really explore, like, why is that the case? Like, what is it about this that is so endearing and charming? And do we even really like any of these characters? Are they all terrible? Like, I don't know. There's a lot to discuss here, my friend.
Yeah, absolutely. So beyond that, I read the books and I, again, was equally blown away by the books, because one of the things for anyone who's seen both the movie and read the comics is that they're very different from each other. Like they start out kind of on the same path, but then because the movie was being made while the sixth book wasn't out yet, like Edgar Wright and Brian Lee O'Malley, the author, were kind of working together on what the ending would actually end up looking like in the comics. But Edgar Wright kind of like ended it with his own thing. Because as you probably figured out, Sean, by reading these, you know, there's a lot of material in here to put into a 90-minute film. Mm-hmm. So imagine trying to take everything that's in all 6 volumes and trying to turn it into a 90-minute film. You just can't do it. Yeah. There's just so much there. So they kind of made concessions towards the end of the movie, and you just don't get as much on like the later villains. And then the ending is just, it kind of just wraps up on its own and has its own like movie ending in particular. Whereas the comic itself goes in a completely different direction. But they still kind of end up in the same place, which is nice. But for the most part, they're kind of 2 individual beasts, which is why, like, if there's someone out there who's seen the movie but never read the comics, or vice versa, I would encourage you to obviously check out, you know, whatever you haven't checked out yet, because it's pretty cool. It's
kind of encouraging as someone who hasn't read or seen the movie that I'm kind of in for maybe 2 experiences, although I can see where that's like unsatisfying as well. And this gets into a whole other thing about books and movies and like, should they follow the same path? And like, I mean, we're going to probably look into this in The Last of Us pretty soon as well. Is it going to be the exact same story? Is it going to be something different that will, in either case, you're going to upset somebody. So I'm very excited to get into that, my friend.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think without further ado, Sean, we should probably get into this and start, you know, talking about these books, because otherwise we're going to run out of time if we just keep geeking out about, you know, Scott Pilgrim before talking about this stuff. So first off, I just wanted to say that this is our first time doing a podcast like this. So we would love the community's feedback if you like the way we do this type of thing, or if you want to see us do more of this type of thing, you know, please let us know. Hit us up on Twitter or on the Discord.
It's happening anyways.
We would love to hear from you. I'm just saying, because like, again, like if people, for example, don't like this model too, I want to hear from those people too.
I actually would love to have people come in with us, is kind of what my thought was, is that people would maybe come along, maybe 3 and 4, we could have a bit more of a group kind of chat with this as well.
Yeah, exactly. So let's dive into this. We're basically going to go through each book and kind of do like a spoiler cast about them, essentially. And I've jotted down a whole bunch of points that I shared with Sean that we're going to kind of go through. And without further ado, let's start off with Volume 1. So we're going to be covering Scott Pilgrim Volume 1 and Volume 2 today on the show. Although I'm pretty sure, because Sean, as you probably noticed as well, I only have the black and white versions of Scott Pilgrim, and you've got the color version.
I sure do.
I'm assuming the content's the same, because I know that they ended up re-releasing all 6 volume as a 3-volume set, but I'm pretty sure for the color version that you have, they actually did them over like as the 6 individual.
It's volumes. 6 books and tons of extras in the back. I'm not sure if yours has that as well, but there's like, I don't know, maybe another fifth of the whole book is like extras in the back, which I absolutely love.
Mine essentially ends with a picture of Ramona flowers and, you know, a description of what happens in the next novel, and then a Brian Lee O'Malley drawing himself, essentially.
Yeah, no,
that's how it ends.
I have the cover, like it has like extras like the cover that is on your book as well. Right. Yeah, a whole bunch of just like extra sketches and some stories. Dude, like there's so much here. There's really a lot to kind of go over. And even before going in for like beat for beat, like, is Scott Pilgrim a good person, Ryan Turford?
That's something we're going to explore as we go through this. Sean.
Like it's something that crossed my mind. Like I'm really not sure, but there's maybe it's just because we're Canadian. I don't know if the setting has everything to do with it, but like it reminds me of youth. You know, maybe there's a huge nostalgic piece to it, even though I didn't live exactly this life. There's something very special about it as I look through each panel. And when I also like, I kind of I was rereading last night, and I found myself just charging through really, really fast. And the writing is very quick, very witty, and it flows so well that sometimes I actually had to find myself, I had to pause to appreciate the other thing that I love about the books, which is the artwork. I love this art style. It's kind of like campy anime. You know, it's definitely like inspired, but it's not classic anime. It's not, he's certainly not a Japanese illustrator at all, but it has almost like a Wind Waker-esque kind of look to it, which I hugely appreciate. I'm very curious. Like, can you like open up your black and white book? I haven't actually seen. Did that ever take
the
away?
Black and white one is definitely looks like a manga, which is what I read a lot. I love manga. So, but it's the only difference is, of course, you're reading it from left to right as opposed to right to left,
right?
When you read manga, essentially. But otherwise, it's exactly like a typical manga that you would find. And that was kind of the idea behind it. It was like, especially because there's a lot of anime references in here, Sean, as well as, references to other video games.
Video games, like definitely. Yeah. Like, and it just like really jumps off the page, even the way that it introduces the characters as well. Like there's levels. Are they awesome? Are they 7.5? And anyways, I will be all over the place. So this is why we do things together, Ryan. You bring us back on track and I'll explore the space.
Yeah. And to your point, Sean, about, this being a nostalgia trip for me, it was definitely a big nostalgia trip as well, because even though I didn't grow up in Toronto, I grew up, in London, Ontario, and Dorchester, Ontario, which is outside London. They actually there's a lot of references here that, coincide with, places that, I frequented in high school or as an early college student and stuff like that. And we'll get into some of those as well, because I've got a whole section on the notes, Sean, about Toronto and Canada references. Yeah. So we'll get to that in a little bit. All right. But first off, Sean, we'll start off as the book starts off as well, because the very first line in the book is Scott Pilgrim is dating a high schooler.
Yes.
This is where, of course, where we get our intro with all the major characters. Yeah. We got, Scott, we got Kim, we got young Neil, we got Stephen Stills, we got the main four characters, or sorry, Wallace. Yeah. I get them confused a lot, so you'll probably notice this as we go through. They're basically talking about how basically Scott's kind of recovering from like a broken heart relationship. Like he had a relationship with a character we'll learn about later that kind of like put him into regression a bit. And they're basically talking about how Scott is dating a high schooler as kind of like a replacement for to just fill the void.
It's a rebound
somehow.
It's easy. Yeah. It's easy. And who hasn't been there, Ryan? Like this is the thing.
Dated high schoolers, Sean? Is that what you're trying to tell
rebound me? Really. It's whether you've done it or you've had a friend who's done it. Like we've all this group of friends. A scenario that we find ourselves in this book is, I think, pretty identifiable. Anyways, I think it resonates with at least a few people. And it's like an ensemble cast here. Where you're like, oh, there's the roommate who plays a certain role, and there's the sister over here, and there's the ex-girlfriend who becomes a friend, like that you learn later in some of the flashbacks as well. And I'm very curious because, like I said, I haven't finished the story. So you and I are actually going to be talking about the first two books from totally different perspectives. So certain things, I'm sure, that like either happen with some of these characters, maybe they take a turn, maybe they just double down on who they are. But yeah, I think that the book does such a great job in the first third or so, the book to kind of just go, this is who everybody is. And you've got a pretty good sense of the caricatures that they are, because by the end of the book, something amazing, absolutely crazy is going to happen. Like I knew from like the music videos and from the trailers of the movie, and certainly of the game, like where this was going. And yet I still found myself pretty surprised. Like, holy snap, like what the hell is happening in this book?
Yeah, like they definitely want you to get invested in the characters very quickly and kind of learn about them. Because as I'm showing off here in the video version of it with my box set, there's like a bajillion characters in this manga. Yeah. That you'll get to know throughout the entire, 6-book run, essentially. And we'll get to them some of the more interesting ones as we go through this. But also I love too, when they introduce a new character, like below the character, they'll list their name and then they'll name their age and then they'll give them a rating. And the rating usually is on like the either the ESRB rating or it's a review.
Rated T for teen or something like that. Yeah.
Yeah. Like Scott Pilgrim specifically. Scott Pilgrim, 23 years old, rating awesome. Yeah.
Yeah, Wallace Wells, rating 7.5. He's 25 years old. So you kind of get a sense, the first page he's dating a high schooler. So you get a sense he's probably not in high school. Very quickly afterwards, you learn he's 23 years old. And like, that's a pretty big, big difference. That's a big difference, dude. That's like end of college dating a high schooler. And all the reasons why maybe you might think that's a good idea, maybe from an attraction standpoint, but that's probably illegal. I think maybe that's also worth saying. You shouldn't be doing that.
Well, she's 17, so
right.
yeah, it would be.
I'm not sure what weird Canadian laws are there, but I mean, like even the interest and the maturity level as well as it's, and not that Scott Pilgrim is very mature, but it's a little different. You can get a sense from their conversations that he just doesn't care what she's talking about.
Because we're going to talk about kind of Knives and Scott kind of
Knives, man. Oh my gosh.
So after talking to his friends about it, we get introduced to, you know, the roommate Wallace Wells, and kind of we get a tour of Scott's you know, what like bachelor apartment that him and Wallace share together, and it basically they do a diagram showing, you know, the entire everything in the apartment, you know, what belongs to Scott and what belongs to Wallace. Spoiler alert: it pretty much all belongs to Wallace, including the one bed that they both share together.
That's so funny. I don't think I ever realized that. I just kind of scammed through that. Like, it's all his. The futon that they share, they sleep together, and Wallace happens to be gay, so it's just like it creates this whole other dynamic that they poke fun at, and hopefully not too much of a homophobic kind of way. But I had a good laugh about it.
No. They I think they handle, you know, sexuality in a very, you know.
And ethnicity, what do you think about ethnicity as well? Like there's definitely like Knives is Chinese. It comes up quite a lot. And there's a moment in the second book I cannot wait to get to. It's just like, did you really say that? But yeah, there's a lot of like, I don't know, maybe this is an older style book. I wonder how it would hold up with a new age audience. But like we said terrible things back in the day, man. There's a couple instances of the R word in here is in there too. That's like, that was the 90s, man.
But again, this wasn't even the 90s. You have to remember this is like
early 2000s,
late 2000s.
Okay, well like maybe it wasn't that
2005 to 2010 essentially. Sean.
Yeah,
but yeah, same idea.
Pre-enlightenment,
right, because there was a lot of terminology that we use even in the early 2010s that we don't use nowadays, right?
Big time, yeah.
But basically, you know, Wallace is asking Scott about, you know, his interactions with Knives and, you know, have they done anything? And Scott's like, oh, we held hands on the bus once. That was pretty much it. So it sounds like they've got a wholesome relationship going. Anyways. Yes. But I love Wallace. I think he's a great character.
I agree.
We'll talk about him more as we go through. So the next thing that kind of happens is, you know, Scott, of course, is in a band. Sean, I don't know how we got this far in. We haven't mentioned the band yet, but the band Sex Bomb, named after the enemies in Super Mario Brothers. And you'll actually notice a theme when it comes to band names throughout this entire experience. But basically, you know, Scott wants all of his friends to meet his brand new girlfriend, Knives. Yeah. So he invites her to band practice, and basically, so they start playing the song. They're like, it starts off, of course, with Kim on the drums saying, "We are Sex Bomb 1, 2, 3, 4." And then what's cool about the comic is that as you read it, it basically not only has the lyrics for the songs, but also gives you the little guitar tabs so you can play the songs yourself. And they actually use these for the movie to recreate all the songs. Oh, that's awesome. From the book, which is awesome. But if you wanted to play them yourself, like it actually does a really good job of basically teaching you all of this stuff. But you know, Knives mentions it in the book, but she's not allowed to listen to music at home or anything like that. So when she hears rock music for the first time, her mind's blown and she immediately becomes a Scottaholic essentially. Yes.
Yeah. Like, and the energy, like the way that music is sort of like illustrated and visualized in this is like some sort of like lightning or something is so great. And you look at her, like the zoom in on her face is just this classic, like panel by panel, like closer and closer into her eyes, just like, oh my God. And you're right. Like you just see it kind of happen. And I couldn't tell until finally she's like, I really love this. I'm like, I didn't know if she liked it or not, was kind of my what, but you don't have to wonder for very long. They finish the song and she's just like, this is amazing.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, I love that whole sequence. And again, they do a really good job with it in the movie as well, which, oh man, you're going to hear me reference the movie a lot, Sean. I'm sorry. But we'll talk about that later when you've actually had a chance to watch the movie.
That could be a way that we complete this whole thing. Like that could be I think
that's what I want us to do for like the final episode.
Yeah, I like that.
To talk about the movie because I think we gotta do that at some point. So then after that, we get introduced to Scott's sister as well, Stacy, who is rated T for teen. Sean, that's where we get the rated T for teen coming in, and she basically calls Scott I don't know why I keep doing that. She calls Scott to basically, you know, ask about, you know, Knives because, you know, Wallace apparently texted her saying, you know, hey, by the way, you're dating a high schooler, because Wallace is a gossipy person. He likes to, you know, gossip to everyone, you know, what's going on with Scott. And basically, she's asking about it. She's asking about how he talks about how she's Chinese and the fact that, again, also he mentions here that they, you know, they've held hands once, he thinks. Otherwise, they haven't really done anything. So it sounds kind of wholesome. And this kind of leads into a great scene where Wallace and Scott are going to the high school to go meet up with Knives after school. And then the way, you know, Scott ropes Wallace into coming with them is that he's like, oh, there's going to be lots of pretty boys there. So you should come hang out. And it again, sounds kind of gross, but it's also just like Wallace is just like,
well, and at that point, I don't know that if I could tell if he really was gay or if he's just like, those are just guys poking fun at each other because that's what we used to do. Like, and eventually you do learn that is the case. But like, it just, as I'm looking back over this, like the facial expressions on this are everything. And I think that it just comes to the fact that like everything is so exaggerated, like the eyes especially are so exaggerated and the mouths, this is the anime style really coming through. So when his sister is on the phone getting excited about stuff, like you can tell she's like either mad or like kind of getting into it and stuff like it just really, really drew me in from that side. Exactly. So, you know, basically after they meet up with Knives, you know, Scott shoos Wallace away, and then they go on a pizza date to pizza shop here in Toronto. They even have like, they don't actually name pizza with the building itself, but they have the 967-1111 phone number, which is famously in Ontario the pizza delivery phone number that you call if you want pizza delivery, essentially. Yeah. But then they also go to the Goodwill, and they're basically talking about like all the stuff that's happening at, you know, Knives High School, like the kind of the relationships she has with her friends, but also the fact that she talks about yearbook club, Sean. Yeah, because yearbook club is, you know, a bit of a drag, but she's and so high school as well. Just like it's that anchor that like that's where she's at. But you're right. I didn't even notice that. I'm like, what the heck are you talking about? Pizza. I remember the Goodwill, but you're right. Like, there's absolutely even in the color cover, it's orange. You're right. White. That's amazing. Yeah, but that's also something you probably wouldn't recognize too if you're not in Ontario specifically. I guess not. We definitely had pizza here at my college. Actually, that phone number specifically is an Ontario thing. I know. Yeah, the Goodwill, I wasn't sure because it was like like they kind of had half of the logo on there. So I was like, I didn't know if that was just an unknown reference. And then on the very next panel, they kind of like, we're at Goodwill here, and it's half of it's trash and whatever else. So a weird date, but it's what you did. You kind of like, you hung out, you took the bus places, and you killed time together. I mean, that's very much a Toronto thing. Yeah. Where, you know, you just take the bus to a whole bunch of different places or the subway, and you're just kind of going around. And of course, Scott takes Knives not to his secret lair, because, you know, it's too early for her to visit the secret lair, but he takes her to his childhood home that he grew up in, and he just talks about that. His parents don't live in anymore. They don't live in anymore. Yeah. It's like, what? Yeah. So weird. Yeah. But then, I don't think they mentioned it here. I think they mentioned it later, but it's a little known fact, literally his apartment is across the street from the childhood home, essentially. But he doesn't actually mention it here because he doesn't want Knives to know. That's really funny where his secret lair is. But then we get a dream sequence. Yeah, man. After this, when Scott gets home, and this was especially like, again, in the movie, it really drew me in. But then, you know, seeing this actually play out in the comics, I love the style of the dream itself, where, you know, Scott's in the middle of the desert. He's like, I'm so alone, you know, because even though he's dating a high schooler and he's got, you know, friends, it's an empty relationship. A very lonely person. Yeah, exactly. So he's dreaming of being alone, but, you know, Ramona Flowers skates by and says, you're not alone. She's just seeing through the desert. He's like, and then he basically immediately wakes up. He's like, I need to know who this person is, essentially. Yeah, but the last thing he says, she skates off and he goes, can we make out then? Yeah, exactly. I love it. Good times. Yeah. And then, of course, it picks up, you know, the next day in Nippon Sushi, which was a real place in Toronto at some point where you could go get sushi. And they're basically, Scott's basically talking about the weird dream he had, essentially, where he saw this weird girl in his dream. But
it moves on from there where Scott's out with knives at the library and he sees at the counter the girl from his dream, Ramona Flowers, with the goggles, basically delivering a package to the library, essentially. And Scott's like, oh my God, it's that girl from my dreams. She actually exists.
Well, what are the chances? He must have seen her around somewhere, and I don't know how this, because she's an Amazon.ca delivery person who, like, I love we don't call it Amazon.ca here. Like, just so anybody else reading this, like they definitely go out of their way to make it very Canadian, you know? So they
also too, like this, as far as her being, you know, the delivery person, as opposed to like hired by Amazon, as opposed to, you know, the other outside companies that hired before. Like, this is the way Amazon did things back then.
Yeah.
Where they were, because like this was written around the time when Amazon was starting to come into Canada, where they were just a bookstore that happened to also have like some CDs and stuff like that. But it wasn't like, you know, the Amazon that we think of today.
Yeah.
So context is kind of everything here.
Yeah. Carla, anybody in live comment in the chat, we're doing full spoilers on Scott Pilgrim books 1 and 2. And this is just like one of the iconic panels, just like, and that's one of the things that I love that this book does so well. Like, there's moments that happen and it's like, it knows it so well. Like, Brian Lee O'Malley knows these moments are going to hit, and they look great. And they're like, everything about it is so perfect. She's not looking at Scott or anything, but like, it's from his perspective, here she is. And this is this moment. Oh my gosh, I love it.
Yeah. And you actually get to see her colored hair in the colored version, Sean. Whereas
that's right.
In this version, it's just, she's got
that's
hair.
funny, because later on she colors her hair, and they make mention that there's two colors. Yeah, that's funny.
Yeah, exactly. So basically Scott just goes into full shutdown mode where, you know, he's at band practicing. He's like, they're like, Scott, you've only played one note this entire song. What's going on? He's just standing there just like, oh my God, I need to find out who this person is, essentially.
Yeah.
But then we get some flashbacks with Scott's old band, essentially. And this was kind of in another dream sequence where Ramona comes in and they're basically playing at a bar, and there's more, you know, musical stuff and stuff like that. And Scott's like, he realizes it in the mid song, he's like, I'm dreaming, aren't I? And she's like, good call.
And
then the dream sort of ends. So of course, you know, Scott's crusade continues, and this brings us to Julie's party.
Yeah.
So basically, you know, Julie is one of the characters, one of the other characters' kind of ex-girlfriend, and they basically get invited to this big party. But basically Scott is kind of asking around and kind of looking around, because he doesn't know necessarily if Ramona is going to be here or not, but he's like, I'm going to go to this party anyways. But then he finds out from one of the people he meets up with at the party that Ramona is actually there, because he asked this person who apparently knows everyone. He's like, do you know someone who has hair that looks like this? And he puts his like 2 fingers there, and he's like, oh, that's Ramona Flowers.
Like, couldn't be anybody else. That's the only way to describe it. And she happens to be there. Like, I don't know if it's really, I don't even know if it has to be explained why she's there, how it happens. Maybe it's just one of those like house parties that everybody ends up at. That's probably the best explanation for this sort of thing. But like, she doesn't seem to really know anybody. She just happens to be there, and it's just a serendipitous
Well, they touch
thing.
on it a little bit later when we get introduced to Julie outside of the party.
Sure.
But then they talk about it there a little bit, how like Ramona and Julie kind of know each other, because they have a little bit of a relationship there. But they do the full page, you know, kind of panel to show that Ramona is actually there, just leaning up against the wall. She's all cool and stuff like that. So we get, you know, Ramona and Scott's first interaction where he's like, hey, what's up? I like your shoes.
Yeah.
And she's like, thanks. I got them in England. And then he asks if he's dreaming right now. And they both kind of look the other way. And he's like, well, I'll leave you alone forever now.
It should have been over at that moment. Like, it's one of the worst, like, first interactions probably ever. But maybe for that very reason, it's perfect. You know, like, I actually think like when Chelsea and I met, it wasn't too dissimilar to this. Like, it wasn't like a holy cow moment. It was super awkward, to be honest with you. It was very similar to this. Yeah.
Well, and also for folks that have seen the movie, they do with like a very different first interaction in the movie, which is also equally funny. But I won't spoil it here, because again,
well, they have to meet. They have to establish.
It's definitely different in the book.
Yeah,
it's a big difference.
They've seen each other now, and then they kind of just, that's it. And he's still full in obsessive mode.
Well, he's like stalking her because it's like, and then he stalked her until the end of the party.
Dude, all the places. This is another great example of like the illustration just being like, I have to stop and not just like read from page to page, but the way everything is framed is so great. And I actually can't wait to watch the movie too, because there are versions of some of the more dreamlike sequences or more unreal that actually look amazing from what I've seen in the trailers as well. But definitely, you know, Scott's on like the staircase and he's just like peeking up over and watching her go into these other rooms and peeking around the corner. He's just a total weirdo. But somehow, like, this is what I was talking about at the beginning. Like, should we like Scott Pilgrim? And what he does to Knives in a little bit is, or I guess what he's doing to Knives right now, it's like he's not being very faithful to her. He's not being very fair to her at all. He's completely obsessed with this other chick and in a totally shallow relationship with his high school girlfriend.
Yeah, exactly. Like he's just following this person around because he's obsessed with her because, you know, she's in his dreams essentially. Not because, you know, he knows anything about her or anything like that either. Like he's just, you know, he's just dumbfounded. He's like, I need to know who this person is right now and make out with them, I guess. Yeah. But yeah, you're right. There's a little bit of sleaziness there for sure. So then of course he's asking, you know, about Ramona at the party, and basically find out that Ramona is an American. She just moved to Toronto essentially, and she just got out of a breakup. Essentially, it's essentially what we learn. But I love when Scott talks to Julie about it, who is running the party, and she's like, Scott, I forbid you from hitting on Ramona, even if you hadn't had a girlfriend in over a year. And I love kind of the way they like color in her face and everything like that to like show just how like
she is serious
about this. But at the same time, Scott's just like,
whatever.
I'm not going to, you know,
he's on a path.
Yeah, exactly. So he gets home and basically he's in bed with Wallace talking about this because Wallace gets home and he's like, I'm drunk and I'm just going to lay in bed. And he basically he's talking about how he met up with Rhoda and stuff like that. And he draws a picture of the shoes for him as well. He's like, those shoes are Mr. Silly's shoes, Scott, because apparently Mr. Silly is a thing that exists in this world. But basically the next day, it's Scott tries to figure out more about Ramona and is trying to figure out how he can get in touch with her. But then he learned that Ramona is a delivery person for Amazon.ca. So he decides to have the brilliant idea of ordering CDs from Amazon.ca so they will just show up at his house. And I love, of course, he uses his Wallace's credit card to basically pay for it.
He's so broke. He is broke. He's a total just like deadbeat, man. This guy. He's a weird stalker dude. He has no money.
He's wearing Wallace's socks, Sean. What do you expect?
Learn later that he's got like some $1,000 debt to the local video store as well. And the Snack Network jumps in here and he says, Dave says, the point is, I think, is that Scott sucks is why he never got through the movie actually. And that's also true. Get it. I get like, and it's kind of like a Seinfeld kind of thing as well, that he's not a wholesome person, but maybe who is, I think is.
Well, I was going to say, he feels like a very realistic character in a lot of ways too, because there's not a lot of people that are just purely a good person.
Totally. Yeah. We're all just trying to figure out, especially at this age, we're just trying to figure out life.
Well, and especially too, when you go through, you know, a breakup like that and you're depressed, like you do stupid stuff. Yeah. That just happens.
Yeah. Unfortunately, for sure.
Yeah. So Scott's basically waiting at the door immediately after he orders his package, and Wallace is like, you know, it's not going to show up right away. So he goes on a date with Knives and nothing really super eventful happens. But this is the moment where Scott's starting to realize, oh, this is not, you know, the way things are going. And I should probably, you know, think about getting away from Knives essentially.
Well, and she really starts to pour it on here. I feel like she was kind of just like hanging out, and maybe this is where they kiss. Yeah. Like she's really starting to like lean into him and she's hugging, and you're right. Like it's again, another great panel of just like, she just surprises him with a big old smooch, heart's coming on her side, and his eyes are just like completely bugging out. He knows, and we know what the heck is going on. And this is a moment where I think I even messaged you the first time I was reading this, where I'm like, I feel bad for Knives. And you're like, just wait. Like, you won't feel bad for Knives.
It only gets worse.
I know,
it
but
only gets worse for Knives.
But I still do. And again, I haven't read the entire story. Maybe she just goes completely even further off to where I know she goes. But like, I really do feel bad for her in this situation. Like, she's this fairly innocent, if not completely innocent, like high school girl who's put her trust into this older guy and probably shouldn't, has probably been warned by like, you don't trust older dudes. And they're only after whatever, and she gets betrayed by him in the worst kind of possible way. So I think that's definitely worth at least acknowledging in this. Like Knives is going to do some crazy stuff, but she's completely shattered by this.
Yeah. Well, even Wallace tries to warn her. It's like, he's too good for him, or sorry, you're too good for him. You should break up with him. Like that's the first thing he says to her, essentially. So, and
I've been around people who have received that warning. Nobody knows what to make of that. People are trying to do like the right thing by like, you know, giving them warning signs, but like you kind of have to beat somebody over the head with a message like that before they actually understand. Like, no, seriously, this dude's messed up and he's gonna wreck you. Yeah. Yeah.
So then just kind of move things along here. We've got, you know, another dream sequence where, you know, Scott's in a school and he finds out that Ramona is about to come to his door, which, by the way, in the movie, this is an amazing sequence in the movie that they do. And I love the musical choice that they go with there that isn't really portrayed in the comic book here.
Yeah.
But, I love the animation here as well, where she's getting closer and closer to the door. And then all of a sudden, Scott hears kind of a rap at the door. And Ramona is there with his package. And she's basically like trying to give him his package. Essentially, he's just like, please sign for this so I can leave. And Scott's like, you want to go out with me? you want to go, you know, hang out and stuff like that. And eventually, you know, she explains why she keeps appearing in his dreams, where basically there's a thing called the subspace highway that allows you to move super quick through time. She mentions that, you know, it's 3 miles in 15 seconds through Scott's brain if she travels through his brain, essentially, which is why he became obsessed with her, essentially, like that. But she mentions that, you know, Canadians don't know about this thing, and it's very much an American thing.
So funny. And he makes the comparison, and he's so clueless. Like, you mean like in Super Mario 2? She's like, no, like nothing remotely like that. Do you, like, should we explore even at this moment, like, what is it about her? Like, why is he completely obsessed with her?
Yeah, I think at this point he's only like infatuated with her because of the dream stuff, where she's appearing in his dreams and she's like this dream-like figure to him. Like, because again, he doesn't know anything about her. Right. I mean, she's also got a great sense of style as well. So totally, it's that a little bit of that, but I think for the most part, it's just like she's running through his mind literally. Yeah. So he's like always thinking about her, and I think that kind of, you know, puts him in the mindset to go after her, especially too because it's like, you know, it's almost like, you know, when you go to summer camp, Sean, and you're not dating anyone, or you're in a relationship you don't care about, and you meet someone there, even if they're not like your ideal person, you're more likely to, you know, develop feelings for that person if you're away from, you know, everyone else. If you're only seeing those people for 3 or 4 months at summer camp. Yeah,
it's there's a fleeting, and I think that's really at the heart of this, Ryan, is like and there's so many moments where she could just like go away and be gone forever. Like he saw her out there at the library, and she should have been out of his life forever. And maybe that's why the Canadian setting is so important here, because it's almost maybe a little bit more believable that they could run into each other more and more, rather than like a big city like LA or something. Although Toronto is not exactly small. Yeah, I mean, you should be able to get lost in this, but the universe that they've created is small enough for them to, it makes sense that they would run into each other. And that's, like, so he's trying to capture and hold on to this person who should be flying away and never coming back to him ever again.
Yeah, exactly. So this, of course, leads to eventually, after much convincing, he finally convinces Ramona to basically, you know, hang out with him, essentially, as he puts it. So they do a hangout, aka a date. They go on their first date of just walking around, you know, Toronto at night, in the middle of April. So of course there's just snow everywhere. You know, it's April. They make a note of that in here. They're like, isn't it like April? Why is there still snow?
It sure is.
And they get caught in a snowstorm. But they find a door, Sean. They find a door.
This is the one. This is the one panel. It's in the music video for, was it Black Sheep?
Yeah.
That shows up there, and I was like, oh my god, yes, it's so.
I love this one panel of them just going through the door.
Well, and panel by panel, the snow gets like worse and worse. The storm that they're in kind of gets more and more crazy. And and
they can't see each other.
I think the other thing I wanted to mention here too is like when I first started the book, and maybe this is me projecting a little bit too much, is like Scott is almost like, he's pretty dorky, and he's not very, I don't know, he doesn't really have too many amazing qualities about him that you go like, wow, he could get any girl he would try for. But he kind of does. Like, I don't know what it is about him. Like, he kind of can get girls, which is amazing. I'm not sure exactly what there is about him that allows for him to do that. And then we learn later about his fighting skills, but maybe I'll leave it at that for now. But
we'll get to that.
He's more capable than I think he comes across. He comes across very much like, I mean, Michael Cera being cast as him is like perfect. Like just this shucks, whatever kind of kid. But he's actually I don't know, he punches above his weight class in a number of varieties, I would say.
Yeah. So this is the moment now where we get, brought into Ramona's apartment. She mentions all the different type of tea that she has, and it's this just giant paragraph.
Yeah, I didn't even read the whole thing.
All these different teas.
Yeah.
And fun fact for the movie, Mary Elizabeth Winstead, who plays Ramona in the movies, memorized all of that.
Amazing.
And she actually says it in the movie well, in a great way as well. But so he basically is like, they're both cold.
Yeah.
So Ramona goes to get him a blanket, but he goes up, while she's changing. She's like, dude, I'm changing.
Yeah. Kind of weird.
But they kind of end up in bed together. But they don't have sex. They make a note of this. They're like, she's like, yeah, we're not going to actually do it right now, but we'll just cuddle, and I have the right to reserve to change my mind.
Yeah,
about
very
sex
flirty,
later,
very cheeky. I think that's kind of like it's got that, I don't know, early 20s kind of energy. Yeah, I like it.
Yeah. So around the same time as well, and this kind of leads to kind of like our final arc of this first book. We also learn that the band Sex Bomb has a gig at the Rocket coming up. Yep. So Scott invites Ramona to come, see his band at the Rocket, essentially, which, by the way, the Rocket's a real club that exists in Toronto. It actually is a real place. Yep. And they do a good job of representing here in the book, essentially. And I think in the movie, I think they actually filmed there too, which was really interesting. But essentially, Scott also forgets that Knives is also coming to the show as well.
Oh, it's going to be a catastrophe, Ryan. You can't have everybody showing up here. It's just terrible. It's no good.
Of course. So Knive, of course, shows up and plants a big old kiss on Scott while Ramona is basically there looking. Yeah. And basically Scott just looks around the room and he's like, well, I have to go. And he just pieces out as quickly as possible.
And there's a great panel of like everybody looking at him. Is that there? Or maybe that's later on.
It is.
It's just
everyone looking at him.
Yeah.
But it's also there's also another subplot that's going along here as well, because Stacy brings along her boyfriend Jimmy. But then Wallace is super into Jimmy, so it's also got as they're looking around, like there's also panels of Wallace specifically looking at Jimmy and them smiling at each other and stuff. So, so that basically leads to the first band, the opening act, of the show, Sean, Crashin' the Boys, which, by the way, named after an NES game, Crashin' the Boys.
Oh, I didn't know that. I was because you mentioned there's a theme to the band names, and I wasn't sure I was picking up on that. So
they're all video game names.
Okay.
That's the thing. Like, and there's a couple other notable ones that we're going to talk about a little bit later. But Crashin' the Boys is a game that exists, and their thing, Sean, is all their songs they play are like 0.4 seconds long. Essentially, they sing micro songs, but their last song, their final song, basically murders the audience.
Does it actually? I was going to ask you, like, what even happens in here? Like,
it doesn't kill them, but it knocks them out.
And it's definitely a bit of a play and a pun on a lot of high school bands back then. Was like these punk rock, like totally crazy, nonsensical, very short, not structured songs. So yeah, they'd be a split second long. Like, I don't know about you, but I saw a lot of bands like that when high school and after high school as well, for sure.
Yeah. But so Sex Bomb comes up to come play their show, and they're like, oh, they killed they knocked the audience out. So this is going to make rough. And this also is where we find out that Jimmy and Wallace are making out.
I know. It's just like off to the side. I want to quickly pause on this notion. Like we're at whatever this place, whatever this venue is. We're here, and there's so much going on, and I am teleported into the pages here as if I'm actually there, because I don't know, like it just reminds me of those days where you look over here and something's happening over there, and isn't that crazy? And then you look over here and something happening over there, and isn't that amazing? And it's really what made the next day so fun, was just like recounting what happened, and this captures that so perfectly, just because it's so every moment gets its own panel, it gets its own illustration and moment there that you can hang on that. But yeah, like that doesn't really, there's nothing really there after that moment. There's a gasp and Wallace, how dare you, and that's kind of it. And then we keep moving on to whatever else is happening here, and I think that is remarkable. Yeah,
because we have Sex Bomb about to perform, but as they're about to play, a crash comes through the ceiling, and William Matthew Patel Matthew Patel shows up, the first evil ex-boyfriend. And they actually hint at this as we go through it. I didn't mention it here because I kind of wanted to save it for this moment where, Scott receives a random email.
Oh my
like,
gosh.
Hi, I'm Matthew Patel and we'll be fighting soon and stuff like that. And
he just ignores it.
This is really boring. He just ignores it. And then he gets a letter in the mail again from Matthew saying, hi, I noticed that you didn't respond to my email. So I'm Matthew Patel. I'm good. We're going to be fighting soon. And Scott just immediately throws it away. So Matthew shows up and he asks Scott, hey, well, Scott asks him what's going on. And then Matthew's just like, oh, didn't you get my letter or my email?
Yeah.
I sent you this saying we're going to be doing this. It's like, oh, I skimmed them.
As he would. Like, that's exactly what this character would absolutely do. And then everything just transforms at this moment. Everything is pretty wholesome and, down to earth, very grounded. And all of a sudden, they're full on fighting, like a fighting game. And there's electric shocks. And this is where you realize actually Scott Pilgrim can hold his own, which we get into a little bit later as well.
Yeah, because at this moment, this is where Kim mentions that he's the best fighter in the province. Province of Ontario.
Exactly. Well, and then they get into, they're counting how many hits he's getting. He's got a combo going. He's got 45, 46, 64 hits. And that's a new personal best. They're commenting on the
he's
side.
going for the air juggle they mentioned.
Oh my gosh.
Because again, it's meant to be, because the concept is meant to be like a fighting game arcade mode, essentially, where you fight it, but it's like 7 different characters with the boss character at the end, essentially.
Totally.
It's totally framed after Mortal Kombat specifically, because there are 7 characters in the
interesting.
original Mortal Kombat, and there are 7 evil X's in this.
Yeah. Oh, that's so funny. Yeah, so they're kind of explaining, which is also hilarious in and of itself, that as they're exchanging punches, and this is a trope in probably more anime than anything, they're just having a full-on conversation while beating the crap out of each other.
Well, Ramona tells the backstory as well, which is just drawn in a really interesting way as well.
Yeah.
Where they're basically talking about how Matthew and Ramona would beat a bunch of people up that were a bunch of bullies.
All the jocks were into her, and he was this little more of an emo kind of kid off to the side, and eventually won her heart on that front. But they didn't date very long. I think that's the other thing that is amazing about this is you think about all these evil ex-boyfriends or whatever, and you think there's going to be this crazy history, but it doesn't matter. If they dated for a year,
for 2 weeks.
Exactly. It's it counts, man. It counts.
They kissed once and they dated for 2 weeks.
Totally.
But that kind of ties into what we're going to talk about Knives later, because Knives kind of falls into the same kind of.
Yeah. Good call. Good call.
So then he shows off his mystical powers.
What are these girls?
Yeah. They basically try, they're like Bollywood demons, essentially. They do a better job of doing this. Yeah, they do a better job of explaining this in the movie.
Yeah.
Because they have this whole music sequence around this fight specifically.
Oh, that's funny. Yeah.
It's this whole Bollywood sequence and everything. And they do a much better job there. Whereas because he's basically singing this whole time.
Sure.
But it's not really shown in it doesn't come across that well in the manga specifically. But basically Scott teams up with the rest of the band, as well as, Wallace and young Neil and Stacy, to basically form a protective barrier from Matthew Patel's kind of, energy attack. Yeah. And then Scott basically knocks him out and then gets a couple coins. He gets exactly $2.10, which, he's missing 50 cents.
Not even enough for transit. Home. Exactly.
Yeah.
And it's what happens to him exactly? Is he dead? What is happening here?
He is DED. Dead.
So he's murdering these because we get into another one in the next book, but he's actually dead. He's gone. And Ramona is participating and all. Everybody is fine with this. They're all seeing that murder is happening.
Well, I think again, in this world, this seems like a common thing.
That is so weird. So where even are we? Because again, it seems very grounded, but this is arcade video game-esque. And so he just eliminates him from existence, gets $2.10. Apparently that's all he's worth.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. So basically, Ramona and Scott basically just escape as quickly as possible, and they're riding the Young University subway line home. Yes, it's a real subway line here in Ontario, in Toronto, where basically she mentioned specifically to Scott, and this is the first mention of this, that he basically has to beat her seven evil ex-boyfriends in order to, continue to date Ramona, essentially. And this is also the first, instance where we see Ramona's glowing head, which we'll get to in a later volume. That is an important sticking point saved towards the end specifically. And then make note of this as well here, but it's something to keep in mind for later.
Her glowing head, like the lines around her head, like it's this.
Yeah,
this is
the glowing, the lines around her head. Basically, her head's kind of like the sun, essentially.
Okay.
And again, you see that a little bit in volume 2 as well.
Sure.
But we probably won't talk about that too much.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's an important. It's a point to note for.
Okay.
So,
all right.
There we go. That's volume one.
One. Yeah.
Yeah, we're at 10:23, Sean. So we gotta zoom.
We're doing good. We had
2.
a good kind of like precursor to all this, but yeah, I like this. Yeah,
that's true. That's true. So volume 2 starts out with a flashback in Northern Ontario.
Yes,
this is where we get Scott's backstory. Also, I love the very first panel is like an ode to Bonk's adventure.
Nice
with Scott Pilgrim there with the logo and everything. Great TurboGrafx 16 game, by the way. So. Basically, Scott shows up. He's a 16-year-old transfer student at a brand new Catholic high school, and there are some bullies there. And he totally gets beat up and sent to the principal's office on his very first day at the at the high school. And he meets. This is the introduction of Lisa.
Yep.
Basically, his friend, his best friend in high school, where essentially they're both sent to the principal at the same time, and she's like, they're talking about how he got sent there in 15 minutes. She's like, dude, that's epic. That's pretty awesome.
Yeah.
So
she falls for him like instantly, and this is where it kind of comes to dawn on me that Scott Pilgrim is a bit of a heartbreaker, man. Like he's got girls kind of fawning all over him for whatever reason, and I guess it just depends on where they meet up. But she likes it. He's kind of a badass, maybe a little bit.
Yeah.
So she's falling for him big time, and he's kind of clueless to it as well, and who hasn't been there. So yeah, like they kind of hang out as well. But he meets other people very quickly, Ryan.
Yeah, absolutely. So, after just hanging out and playing video games with Lisa, he eventually meets up in chemistry class with his new lab partner, Kim P.
Yeah.
Of course, that we know from Sex Bomb, which is pretty awesome. So that's the beginning of, Kim and Scott's relationship. And basically, Lisa and Scott are jamming out because Scott's learning, the bass and she's learning the guitar. They're basically they're like, hey, we should start a band. Yeah. Because if we're in a band, we'll transcend our, class status because, they're not quite jocks or not quite, goths, essentially, is the way that Lisa puts it, essentially. But they need to find a drummer. So one day they go to this band, thing, and they see Kim playing the drums, and then Scott's like, oh, look at her, she's on the drums, she's my lab partner. and Lisa of course is just like, which girl up there? There's like a million girls up there on the stage. And of course Scott points out that she's playing the drums, and she's like, well, she's totally hitting those drums with the sticks. That's a thing. So they invite, Kim to join the band, and they start hanging out more. But Scott admits to Lisa that he likes Kim P. Essentially. So this leads on.
But this is a moment. This is a key moment in a lot of people's, in their youth of kind of falling for somebody else. And one way or another, it's like you fall for somebody else, and then they are the ones who tell you that they're actually starting to like somebody else. And it's what do you do in those moments? It's a very heartbreaking moment to have that trusted. You're very close. You're obviously close enough friend for that person to trust you, to tell you that they like somebody else. But it's very heartbreaking. So I felt for Lisa in this moment as well. It's clear that she was kind of crushing on him a little bit.
No, absolutely. And again, this isn't the last time we're going to explore this topic.
Totally.
Well, but so we find out though on Monday when Scott's basically going to ask Kim to basically join the band and also to tell her that he likes her. He shows up at the school, and everyone's like the dude at the front gate's been beat up, and he finds out that Kim's been kidnapped essentially by this rival high school. The Bevy Boys, essentially is what they're called, anyways. Which again, this is totally an ode to something like River City Ransom, essentially. The NES game. But basically Scott fights through a bunch of the cronies and meets up with the final boss, Simon. And of course you've got, Kim kind of chained up in the back. Scott, this sucks. And they have kind of this like epic, fighting, like stare down essentially in the comics, which is so good. But Scott, as you imagine, totally beats him up in the rain.
Yeah.
And kicks him off the building, essentially.
Dude, oh my God.
Because he pleads for forgiveness and he's like, you'll never change. And then he kicks him off the building.
So I've read this a couple of times, actually, once with the books and then also with the iPad. And I started taking screenshots of some of my favorite pages and panels, and just the yeet off the building is so amazing. And then he has a very, he rescues the princess, basically. Like, she's all chained up. She's in the rain. What a terrible situation. He gets rid of the bad guy. And then, they have a little smooch there.
Yeah, because he's like, you want to play drums in our band, and also I like you, by the way.
Totally. Yeah, this is the way things
and
go.
she's just like, yep. So again, we get a big montage here, just showing, all the events that are kind of happening, in their relationship, them playing in shows and stuff like that. I also love their band name, Sean.
Sonic and Knuckles.
Yeah. Good band name. Good band name. Again, all about video games.
Yeah.
But eventually we get to this final panel where Scott's mentioning, and to Kim that he's moving to Toronto.
Yeah, so very sudden.
Moves away. Yeah, it's just out of nowhere because his parents decide to move, essentially.
Yeah, and that's really it gets you back on track. That was basically like a chapter of this. This is where he came from, and very suddenly, and now we're back to kind of where we left off here.
Yeah, and also too, it's just one of those things where normally, if this was like nowadays, I would imagine they'd probably continue dating. Just do the long distance thing.
Sure,
it's so much easier to do now versus early 2000s when this was written.
Yeah.
When, that just wasn't really a thing.
But Kim comes along eventually, like she moves to Toronto. I don't know if that's explained later.
Eventually. They don't explain it here, but they do eventually.
Yeah, like she ends up back in their life and explains it later on to Ramona, because there's jealousy everywhere. It's definitely a theme of the entire, so far anyways, of the series, of the books.
Well, and you get like hints of jealousy from Kim in the first book, but they don't explain why. And then here they finally explain why.
They dated.
And also, outside the movie, what they actually did, what's cool about this whole sequence, this whole flashback sequence in Northern Ontario, is they actually did like an Adult Swim short for this, where they did like a 6-minute, animated special of just this flashback, essentially, where it's him meeting up with Lisa, and then the fight with with the Bevy Boys, and then Kim and Scott dating, essentially. And they posted it to Adult Swim, and this was before the movie came out. So if y'all haven't checked that out yet, I recommend checking it out.
I was just seeing if
really
there's anything in the back,
it's really well
the extras there. There's nothing quite there, but I'll check that out.
And they actually, I think that's going to give us a sample of what's going to happen with the Scott Pilgrim anime that's coming to Netflix later this year as well.
Oh, I know. Oh my gosh, dude. Well. Yes. Give it to me.
Yeah. But of course, this leads into another dream sequence where Scott's playing video games, but then we realize that he's actually dreaming, because Ramona's like, "Are you really dreaming about video games?" And he's like, "Yeah." And she's like, "Well, quit dreaming, get out of bed," essentially.
Yeah, bit of a transition, really, to again get back to real life here, where Scott is given a bit of an ultimatum from his roommate Wallace, like, okay, enough is enough. And it's finally somebody with a bit of a moral compass, a moral center here, going like, Scott, you're being a dinkus. You're not being very fair to Knives. I like that the book at least like recognizes that that's a thing, and the roommate is the right person to be saying that to Scott, I think, in that moment.
Yeah, exactly. So he's basically like, "Look, you got to break up with her, or else I'm not letting you back in the house."
Yeah, or I'll tell
everything. Essentially,
I will legit I'll blow your cover. And I wondered if he was going to do that. I wondered what was going to happen with that ultimatum, if he was going to take it seriously.
I really feel like he would have.
I agree. I totally agree too. And yeah, things kind of get a little. And of course they turn out this way. They're at the record store, as you would, and she basically drops the L bomb. She says, "I love you." And again, these moments, these panels of just like the word love, like just like smokes them.
And Scott's like, "Oh no!"
Oh my gosh, it's so good. And she looks so like, again, cute and innocent. She's got a little heart over her head, just like. And he's like, "I think we should break up.
We should just break up or whatever."
Yeah. And again, this is a story. I'd love to know how this is done in the movie as well, because it just goes to her, to him, and they are in completely different places in this moment, where she just said that she loves him, and he's just trying to like oblige to the ultimatum at this point. He's checking off a box by telling her that they should break up so that he can go on to move on to the next thing. And she's, again, it's not like the most realistic, obviously, art style or anything, but her look she is shattered from the inside and out at this.
Yeah, this is the moment where you really feel for
man, no kidding.
because she's also talking about the fact that she wants Scott to meet her parents and stuff like that. And Scott's like, well, aren't I a little too old for you? But then she talks about how her parents kind of have the same age difference that they have.
Yeah.
So she's totally like ready to move to the next level. And Scott's just like, no, it's kind of over.
Yeah.
And in the record store of all things.
And sadly, this is something like, man, people need to, how do you even learn this kind of thing? But people are generally very bad at these moments, you know, like you got a little bit more compassion, a little bit more tact on this. But he's just, like I said, he's just checking off a box. He's not really trying to do this carefully at all. And in that way, like he just ruins her. And you can see he's kind of like looking at her, like almost like waiting for whatever she's going to do. He doesn't know what to do. He's waiting. And then he moves on. He's like, so we're done. All right, I'm going to get on the bus. And he's contemplating things. You can see he's thinking like, oh, he kind of feels bad for a second. Then he starts to think about Ramona. And then he's happy again. Yeah. And he's walking home. He's got a music note over his head. Like he's like whistling along and he's great. And Knives it also kind of goes back to her for a panel or two. And she's left behind with nobody, nothing. And he's moving on to the next thing. Yeah.
He's just like, but again, he's happy about it because it's almost like, again, it's almost like he should have done this earlier and then had this weight off his shoulders because that's, you know, why he's so.
But he's not considering like I think the point is that his mind has moved on completely, not even just from his relationship, but from considering what Knives is feeling at that point.
That's true. But this is, of course, now transitions to the dinner sequence with Ramona coming over to Scott's apartment and seeing it for the first time. And this is also where we learn that Scott's actually a pretty good cook. He's actually good at cooking stuff. He bakes a whole loaf of garlic bread. And then they're talking. I love their conversation about garlic bread and how she's like,
it'll make you fat.
She's like, I can't believe you made a whole loaf of it. And he's like, but it'll make you fat. And he's like, but bread makes you fat. That's a thing.
Like, we didn't know that. we learned that much later. But you're right. Yeah, he's got he's got a great apron on and everything. Yeah, totally.
Yeah, exactly. And Wallace, of course, tries to steal some of the food. He's like, all right, you'd have some food, but get out, kind of thing.
Oh my gosh.
But they're making out, of course, in Wallace's bed, essentially. And he starts freaking out about it because she mentions that his hair is really long. And he's like freaking out. He's like, oh my God, what's wrong? Because you find out, you know, that Scott hasn't cut his hair since his last relationship because of like thinking that it was because of the hair that, you know, his last girlfriend broke up with.
Blames breakup largely on haircut 431 days before. 3 hours before the breakup. That is amazing. Yeah, that's hilarious.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. So then we get another dream sequence, but it's not from Scott this time. It's actually Kim's dream sequence where she's at Scott's funeral essentially, and this is of course leads into the chapter, the late Scott Pilgrim essentially. But what I liked about this chapter and kind of the beginning of it is it kind of focuses on, you know, we get to see Kim's life and what she's like. She's basically living in this, you know, house with 3 different girls that are kind of jerks that they don't get along or anything like that. Like the one girl is like super, you know, upset. Like Sarah's upset that, you know, she got woken up super early because Kim had to go to work. So it's this whole thing where I like that they focus on some of these side characters every once in a while. And this is, again, won't be the last time we see something like this.
Oh, okay.
The books.
Well, and again, like I think it would be interesting to know what people would say about you at your own funeral, and what this kind of gives a little hint as to like the narrator and what the characters are really thinking of Scott is that he isn't amazing, and people do have their issues with him. I think one of the first things they say is like, I guess he kind of deserved it and he had it coming. It's kind of sad, sort of like the girls are having these conversations. Kim and Lisa's there. I'm not sure if I recognize, who's the third one there? Is that supposed to be Envy? I'm not entirely sure. There's a third, the one who says like, it's kind of sad. I actually don't know who that's supposed to be.
I was going to say, I'm going to leave that for later.
Okay.
Yeah. But yeah, so I love this whole sequence where, again, we learn more about Kim. And again, Scott Pilgrim has such a great, you know, supporting cast of characters. Yeah. So I like that, you know, Brian focuses a little bit on each one and gives them their own moments.
Totally.
But this kind of leads into a situation where Scott comes into the video store. And this, of course, is where we learn about, you know, Scott's crazy debt anyways. Although he actually, you said he owes $1,000. That's only between him and another person. He actually only owes $504.28.
Okay. I got actually.
Yeah. But I also, because also he shares that with Steven Stills.
It's actually on the screen here. Yeah, totally.
Yeah. And also it's because he rented the Land Before Time 4. It's 36 weeks late. He claims that the mice hid the video somewhere in his apartment. Also, he claims that he rented it as a joke. Do not rent anything to him,
he is scum. That again, if anybody's ever worked at a video store, like that is the type of no holds barred type of note and comment that you would have on maybe a friend, but certainly like a customer. Like they would leave these things so that, to make the point. You don't want to let this guy weasel his way out of like another favor.
Yeah, exactly. So basically the reason Scott's there is because he needs to rent a bunch of movies.
Yeah.
Because, and I find it's weird that they kind of drop this in such a weird way, but he finds out that Ramona's second evil ex is a dude called Lucas Lee, who is a movie star.
Yep.
And he basically is renting a bunch of movies because Paul says, oh, well, you should rent a bunch of these movies so you can basically, train on how to, take this guy down, essentially. So that's the whole reason that they're there. And I kind of love the setup. And then from there, we get a visit to Second Cup Shop.
Yes. Which
for those that aren't in Canada, that's a Canadian coffee shop chain, kind of like a Dunkin' Donuts, but it's just
it tries to be Starbucks. It tries to. I don't know if it I think Tim Hortons is more of the Dunkin' Donuts.
It's kind of like the in between Tim Hortons and Starbucks.
Sure.
Is how I'd phrase it. Yeah. But this is where we see the
they're doing some reconnaissance here a little bit.
Yeah, this is also the start of where we see kind of Ramona and Stacy's kind of relationship start to grow as well.
Yeah, his sister.
They start to become friends, which is really cool.
Yeah.
But then of course we get kind of the training sequence where Wallace is working with Scott to basically get trained, like doing push-ups, watching all kinds of movies and stuff like that to basically figure out how to take down Lucas Lee, essentially. Oh geez. So next up, of course, we get, the famous cover of Now magazine, Sean, which of course was a local free Canadian magazine that you'd get all about, different bands and stuff like that. And the Clash at Demon Head is on the cover, and that's going to come up a little bit later. Clash at Demon Head, by the way, good NES game. It's also
good for. I'm glad you're here for explaining some of these things because I mean, they feed into they're good names. It seems like it fits, but there's inspiration from somewhere. That's awesome.
Also, I love this next sequence too, where Scott's on the bus with Ramona, and he's like, "I wrote a song about you," and it's literally just
her name
over and over again. And then he's like, and then he explains, well, and then further in the song, there'd be a verse, and it's like da da da, and then more Ramona over and over again. And by the way, Sean, there's actually a version of the song from the movie soundtrack because they did that song in the movie. So there you go. But then this leads to Knives. We start to see the stalkerish behavior start to come from Knives.
Yeah.
He just shows up at Scott's apartment and asks Wallace, "Hey, can I just wait here until Scott gets back?" And she's like, "No." He's like, "No,
you have to go.
Get out of here." Yeah, exactly. So this is all leading into, a big sequence, Sean, that happens in the book, all about cooking vegan shepherd's pie, which I thought was a great sequence, Sean, because not only was it really interesting because they have like kind of the Kim, Ramona and Scott basically talking about a whole bunch of stuff, but they also give you the full recipe for vegan shepherd's pie and also tell you how to cook it and everything.
Yeah.
Which is great. It's totally woven in there if you actually care.
But also a little bit surprising too. Like this is there's nuances throughout where I just think Scott is just a bum basically, and that he doesn't really eat anything. But yeah, to your point earlier, he is a good cook, and then it really shows that he's capable of something here, and so that it leads some credence to why people might actually be falling for him, at least to a certain degree. Who doesn't like a good cook? But Ryan, I think I said to you, I think even just yesterday as we were chatting, this leads to one of my favorite panels in the entire 2 books is just Knives looking in. They're all having a good time here. And she's at the window just like staring. And in the colored version, in the colored book, color edition, it's red. And it's just like this beaming, it's almost like you can hear that high pitched like sound. As soon as I got to that panel, I just thought, what a great, and then she freaks out. She has a moment. She runs away and she's turned at this point.
Yeah. It's she runs to Chopper's Drug Mart.
Drug Mart.
Because she's got to, pick up some hair dye because she figures out that, he's only into Ramona because she's dyed her hair.
Yeah, she really goes into the copying almost, which is a very high school, I think, kind of thing to do. It's like she's very insecure about herself. And obviously in order to win Scott back, which is obviously her goal at this point, she's got to dye her hair. And she goes through this whole sequence with her friend who's kind of a little bit more middling. And that's kind of the friend that we probably all would want at that moment, like supportive, but like, all right, What are you doing? What are you doing to your hair here exactly? And Knives comes out.
She dyes it 2 separate colors because again, she wants to be like Ramona.
But she likes it. Like she's transforming here as well. Like she dyes her hair. She looks in the mirror. She goes, "I look so good." And there's moments of this that really remind me of Teen Girl Squad from Homestar Runners. I look so good. I don't know. There's just some playful stuff about it too.
Yeah. She also mentions as well that she's like, she thinks she's going to win Scott over because she claims that Ramona is fat and that she's super skinny.
That's right. I know that is a thing that comes up in a little bit here as well. She's like
super obsessed with that, with Ramona's weight for whatever reason. Again, we know Ramona's not fat, but she's just like fat. I
think it might be more of an ethnicity kind of thing, like that. Yeah. That Knives is just tiny. She's very petite. Yeah.
But again, that's crux to her whole strategy of winning.
It's got to be something. Right? Yeah.
Yeah. Well, but then the moment, Sean, we get the trip to Casa Loma, which is a real location, a tourist location in Toronto. In fact, for folks that aren't from Toronto, they actually filmed a bunch of movies there, including most famously, Charles Xavier's, School of Gifted Youngsters is Casa Loma. Essentially, that's the property.
So second reference to that as well, because he's got a badge on his jacket, an X-Men badge.
Yeah. The X, because Ramona asked about it. He barely put it himself. But this is where the big showdown with Lucas Lee happens, because Lucas, of course, is in Toronto filming a movie.
Makes sense.
At Casa Loma. So Lucas is literally just sitting there, basically kind of waiting for him. And he talks about.
They keep calling him Luke Wilson too.
Yep. There's this whole confusing thing because Scott's got a friend named Luke Wilson. He keeps getting them confused, essentially.
Lucas Lee. I mean, there's also a movie star, Luke Wilson, too, Owen Wilson's brother. So that's what I actually thought it was. But you're right. There's an in-universe kind of confusion there as well. And so this is probably the first time that things kind of change for Scott Pilgrim here. He's been beating fools up left, right, and center. And then this actually makes sense. Like, this dude he's way bigger. He's stacked. He is jacked, man. And this gets it. It's ridiculous. He grabs him by the ankles and starts spinning him around like, what was a wrestling game in NES? And whoosh, I don't know if you ever played it.
Just WrestleMania?
I don't know. Yeah, I guess so. And but
he chucks them into Casa Loma specifically.
He Dragon Balls them into the building, dude. It's like, oh my gosh, I love it.
Which is awesome. And then they run up to Scott while he's kind of like knocked out, and they're like, "Are you okay?" And Lucas suggests they take a break. So they basically are just like hanging out on the bench, sharing stories about Ramona and stuff like that, which I thought was like a great moment between the two of them.
Very self-aware. This like what is going on here. Everybody's on the same page. There's no this is ridiculous or anything. It's just, well, this is the way of the world. You must fight me.
Yeah. But then he also mentions as well, because Ramona in an earlier chapter talks about, her backstory with Lucas and what their story was, where they basically, again, dated for like 2 weeks and then, she just decided it wasn't really a thing. But then Lucas mentions that she apparently cheated on him with someone else, essentially. And that was kind of, the difference between the two of them, which is just like, again, like it shows that maybe everything that Ramona is telling Scott isn't exactly true about all this stuff, or at least all the backstory stuff. And it was the first time also like in the story where I really started to question anyway some of the things that Ramona was telling Scott about her backstory.
Well, no kidding, but the whole premise of like this is the way that things have to go.
Oh yeah.
A bit of a red flag when you talk about like, are you going to pursue somebody? Well, you got to go fight the 7 evil boyfriends. Like maybe choose somebody else, and then so they start to layer on top of that.
This is also the point too, where also, Scott's friends actually mention that, they're totally made for each other because they're so similar when it comes to, this
dirty, terrible human beings. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Like,
but there's also like this running thread that Lucas is as a sellout in his career. And they kind of get to a point where they go, Lucas says, give me all your money. And I'll just say that to the next guy, Gideon, or I'm not Gideon. I'm just,
Gideon.
That I'll just say that you did it. And he's like, you really are a sellout. But like he kind of tricks him into skateboarding here, Ryan, is the next thing. So like he doesn't actually end up beating him in a fight. He kind of like plays into his ego to do a skateboarding
because
trick.
He knows he can't win in a fist fight, so he has to outsmart him essentially. And he knows Lucas used to be a pro skater, before he became a sellout anyway. So he's like, oh, well, before you kill me, can you just go like do this, skate down this little thing. I want to see you do some cool tricks and stuff like that. So he goes down, and I love this whole sequence and how it's drawn, because like the speed kind of increases and
in kilometers per hour. It's like, and these random 51 or 47, like. Yeah, he's going increasingly faster. The cumulative speed too fast to live, and that's the piece that kind of like clued me off to like, oh, these dudes are dying. Like these dudes are like being eviscerated, and he ends up not surviving this skateboard trick that he's trying to do.
Nope, he dies. He explodes into a whole bunch of coins essentially for Scott to get. But then Scott also gets a new item, Sean, a mithril skateboard. It's got +4 to speed, +3 to kick, and +1 to whip. But he's like, oh no, I should have taken the skateboarding proficiency back in grade 5. And
he doesn't have like a prerequisite or like the, I don't know.
Yeah, he doesn't have the skill. He didn't invest in the skill tree.
Good. Yeah.
But so then it was weird the first time reading this. Is like, oh, I thought that, the Lucas fight would be kind of the final like confrontation for this chapter, but no. It keeps going because this chapter, Nothing's Ever Over, is a great sequence. So this takes place at the Toronto Reference Library, which again is a real library in Toronto, Sean. It's a real place. The building looks exactly like this because I actually Googled pictures afterwards.
I'm sure. Approximately 82 kilometers of shelving, close to 2 million books. It's got all the details here, totally unnecessary.
Even the opening and closing dates and everything.
Oh my gosh. Like, and again, the illustrations here are worth the price of admission. It shows the building. It's got all these details. And at the top, there's a silhouette and you're not really sure what it is. And it's knives and it gets her detail down below. And even, again, the color edition is so great because you're probably just seeing silhouettes overall. But she is just, she has transformed into this killer.
Yeah, she's a ninja. She's a ninja,
I know.
But so then we return to Second Cut because I felt that this was important to mention it here as well. And this is where Scott walks in and sees Julie working there instead of Stacey.
Oh, yeah, this is where we understand the connection.
And this is where we understand the connection between her and Ramona, because she mentions that Ramona would come in all the time to do deliveries to Second Cup. Right. And they just really got to know each other that way. And basically that's how her and Julie became friends. But it's also how, we saw a little bit earlier how Stacey and Ramona became friends as well.
Yeah.
And this, of course, leads to Stacey and Ramona going to the Toronto Reference Library and looking around for books and stuff like that. But then from the rafters, Knives dives down. And as we see this happen, Ramona goes and picks up a piece of modern art, as they phrase it. Anyways,
totally. Like she
to basically deflect the attack from above, essentially.
Yeah, Stacey's
but that means that she moved out of the way of. That means she moved out of the way of the attack, Sean, grabbed the thing, and then moved back into the attack range just to deflect it.
Exactly. It's so like she understands what's going on here. Has she actually? She's dyed her hair. I think at this point she's cut her hair. She looks a little bit different, and she's ready for this fight. And I actually was really happy to start seeing this because I thought it was going to be a little bit monotonous. That it's always Scott fighting the boyfriends, and now we've got a new dynamic here. That Knives is gone completely berserk. And she's going to try to beat the crap out of her. And this is where the fat jokes really come in. She says, you're dead, fatty. And Ramona's just confused. She doesn't actually know the history here at all. She doesn't know who Knives is, at least at the moment. And they have an epic battle scene, and it really is amazing. And then about halfway through, she goes, oh, I've seen you before. Or Knives realizes that
she puts them together. She puts the things together, that she realizes that Scott was actually cheating on her.
Yes.
Even though at that moment, he wasn't cheating on her. He just saw her at the library. And he's like, that's the girl from my dreams. But yes, she finally figures it out that, in fact, Scott was cheating on her. But then they have this whole fight sequence. And then, of course, she says the line, chow down.
Yes.
Throwing the lines. It's just like, Ramona's like, did you really just say that?
Yeah, that was definitely one of my favorite things. And it leans into something that maybe, I don't know if that would fly these days, but that's that. They have a good fight.
But I love that they're like running up the walls and they're totally fighting each other and they're having this like all out battle.
It goes on for a while.
Ramona, like clubs her with a big plant.
I know.
Essentially.
Yeah.
And it says clong. Oh man, so good. But eventually, Knives runs away and she decides, we'll save this fight for another
day. Very classic. Like nobody's actually going to eliminate anybody, but yeah, she makes her point, fetters off, and then Scott gets a phone call, Ryan Turford.
Yes, exactly. Because Scott decides instead of going to the library because he doesn't know how to get there, he's like, I'm going to go home and just play video games instead rather than trying to meet up with them. But he gets a call from Envy Adams.
Envy.
Who's his ex-girlfriend. Yep. The girl that of course broke his heart because of his haircut, apparently. But this is where we find out she's basically the lead singer of Clash at Demon Head. Yep. And they're in town, and she basically, you know, invites Scott's band, Sex Bomb, to open up for Clash at Demon Head because she wants to throw him a bone, essentially, after, you know, ripping his heart out. But this, of course, throws, you know, Scott into a total shock, and Wallace comes in. He's trying to figure out what's going on, and then Scott basically it just says Envy, and he's like, oh no, Envy called. Crap.
Again, so very understandable. Like, just you get the call from the ex who, like, the one, and it's understandable that this would completely ruin you in a variety of different ways, and it's all set within the world. I don't know. It's very relatable, I think.
Yeah. So he talks to Ramona about it, and then Ramona is just like, and he talks to her, he explains, you know, everything that happened. But she encourages him basically because he just doesn't want to, you know, see Envy at all or basically open up the show for them or anything like that. But she encourages him to actually go through with it, to basically, you know, see this thing through so he can kind of put it behind him, essentially. And this, of course, leads to us going to Lee's Palace, which is a bar in Toronto. I actually saw the Foo Fighters there once.
Oh, snap.
Because they actually did, a, we remember the album In Your Honor, Sean?
Of course.
They did the duo album. Because they did, so on that tour, they did the acoustic tour and the electric tour. And the electric tour, they had invite-only shows that you could go to that were like 200 people or less, essentially, at specific bars. And one of them was at Lee's Palace. And I actually ended up winning tickets to go see that. So I actually was at that show. So I saw Dave Grohl like 2 feet in front of my face because the bar is very small. It's not a very big bar. And they actually, in the comic, they actually accurately represent what it looks like. Because again, there's this big bar that's kind of in the middle with like a stage that's in front of it. But it's not as big as it appears in the comic itself. It's actually kind of like a small bar. Yeah. But I love that Lee's Palace is here. But this is also where we find out Knives is hooking up with young Neil.
She's got her own rebound.
Yeah, she's just like, well, get jealous, Scott, because I'm going to be around all the time, essentially. With young Neil.
But you also start learning about this band that Envy is in and who is in it, and it starts to hint now that Matthew has been taken care of, now that Lucas has been taken care of, we hear the name Todd, I think, for the first time.
Yep. Because Todd's the bass player in Envy's band.
And there's this interaction between Scott and Ramona at one point. He's explaining who's in the band and that Scott's this dude. And she goes, oh, I dated a Scott. And it wouldn't be that funny if they were the same person. And that leads up into a bit of a moment here as well. Yeah.
So we finally say, and then it was time. Yeah. And then, of course, the band comes out, Clash of Demon Head. And then, of course, you know, Ramona and Scott put it together that Todd, the bassist, is in fact Ramona's evil ex-boyfriend, the third one. And then that's how we end it.
That's it.
That's how it ends, with kind of a cliffhanger there in Lee's Palace with like a musical sequence with, you know, Clash at Demon.
And I imagine that's where they play Black Sheep. That's where,
that's where that
what's her name? Captain Marvel. I can't remember her name. I'll tell my head.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah. So she has her great scene, and she's oh yeah, and they're having the conversation back and forth like that's Todd, and I know, and it's like oh you know, oh no. So that's where I started to tie the two things together, from the book to the trailers and the music videos and everything. I was like, I am all in at this point, Ryan. I don't know exactly when we plan on having. We should probably talk about this afterwards, but when we can get on to the next thing. But at this moment, I am completely infatuated with this series. I can't wait to read the next and find out where this goes. Like I said, I think I'm only going to have to reread the third book, but from 4 on, I'm all in, all new at this right now. Yeah. So Sean, we got a couple minutes real quick. Thank you, Kevin. So quick question before we go and before we wrap things up. What did you think about books 1 and 2? Oh, just overall. I mean, I know you're all in. Yeah. I don't. Final thoughts. I think like there's so much. With every page turn, almost the thing is that the book knows, and I mean, really, Brian Lee O'Malley knows not to hang on things for too long. The dialogue in it is almost, I don't know. I don't want to. It's not violent like Quentin Tarantino, or maybe more Kevin Smith. Actually, is maybe more what it's like, where it's just very natural. Like you imagine yourself in these situations, and so it's very much a page turn. It's what I was alluding to at the start, where I had to actually pause every once in a while to appreciate that there's artwork here as well as the story. So like, yeah, it's a very high bar for me to move into anything else. Like I just want to know what else is there. So as excited as I am to move on to the next stuff, I don't want it to be over. So I'm excited that there's a movie. I'm excited that there's an anime. I'll get back to the game. Like there's actually quite a lot to chew on here. And I'm finally starting to appreciate what everybody has been just geeking out about for years and years. And I kind of went, well, how good could it be? I think this is absolutely phenomenal, dude.
Nice. That's good to hear, especially because I know, again, you're kind of new to, you know, these books in particular.
Yeah, man.
That you're loving them. And yeah, I love these as well. Especially, again, they are slower versus some of the later books. Because again, they are trying to, you know, establish the world and, you know, get you to know all the other different characters. And they're trying to introduce you to a lot of stuff in the first 2 volumes. But I think, like, you know, from here on, this is where the story really ramps up in a big way. And I'm very excited to hear what you have to say about, you know, volumes 3, 4, 5, and 6 as well, because it goes places. The story definitely goes places.
I can't wait.
I'm excited to hear what you have to say about this stuff. But I think it's awesome. Folks at home, though, I'd love to know what you think as well. So please reach out to us. Also, again, with this new format, like I said, I want to hear your feedback. If this is the type of thing you guys like, I'd like to do more stuff like this as well. So please let us know if you like this or any, you know, feedback that you have for us regarding this type of format. But anyway, Sean, we should probably wrap up the show. But before we go, Sean, plugs go for Patreon.
Yeah, I mean, most people listening to this are on the Patreon, which so follow me at Sean Capri, Sean like Connor, Capri like the pants. But yeah, like you said, I would just reiterate what you're saying. Let us know what you guys want from this in the future. Do you like the step-by-step kind of thing? Because I actually really enjoyed the play-by-play that we did, as well as a bit of a, I don't know, I just think that a lot of these loop back to real-life experiences that maybe some people can resonate with as well. And if there's any interest for people jumping on board, I want to entertain that and make it even more community-driven as well, just like a lot of the things that we're doing here at Carpool Gaming.
Yeah, absolutely. And one thing I will say this time as well is that I want to try and give the feedback community more heads up next time for volume 3, just because we would love for people to kind of read along with us if you have access to these. Yeah,
good point.
If we've read them before and you want to reread them as well. So we're going to talk about this after and kind of give you like the next date for this. But we want to give you some more time to, you know, catch up with us and read some of these. But as for me, you can find me on Twitter at Ryan Turford, and you find us on Twitter at Carpool Gaming, on YouTube, youtube.com/Carpool Gaming, on podcast servers around the globe. But now, Sean, it's time to wrap up the Geekouts. So for Sean Capri, I am Ryan Turford. This has been the Geekouts, all about Scott Pilgrim, volumes 1 and 2, and we're out.